All right, so it's the next day. We're ready for our first startup. I went ahead and put the fuel tank in. I put some oil in the transmission. I'm sure once I run it, I'm gonna need some more. But really nothing to it but to do it. So key on, get the lift pump running. Give it some glow plug action. See if we got any leaks? No. Okay, glow plug's off. Crank it. See what we got. All right, abort. We have an oil leak. The whole valve appears to be leaking. Awesome. All right, so I haven't decided if I'm going to do anything else tonight, but for the time being, here's an update. When you just look at it, obviously back on all fours. As you saw in the last clip, it runs. In the last clip, this valve was leaking basically at the seam right here, and this bolt, that bolt there that runs up through, comes out here. It's supposed to just thread into the valve housing, and it had actually stripped the housing at some point. So I got a longer bolt, ran it up, put a nut on it, cranked down on it. That seemed to take care of that. So we'll keep an eye on that. I did have a slight leak on the return side of the oil cooler, but that seems to be all set. The plumbing is really actually not bad. The only thing that we got to pay attention to, and I don't know if this is going to get it or not, but yeah, it's not going to. Anyway, one of the ports on the box, one of the pipes going to it for the steering cylinder is kind of loose, but we'll see. If it doesn't leak, I'll probably just leave it for the time being. I got to tighten down the motor mounts. Got to shim the front axle, which is something that we should have done the first time, but there's enough play in that, just from the fact that that's the Deere axle and the Sears chassis. There's enough play in that that it somewhat affects the ability of the power steering. I've got to, let's see, tie up some of the wires, tighten that connection. We got the radiator in, as you can see. I got some antifreeze to put in it so we can run that through and flush it a couple times because there's a whole bunch of shit in there from it sitting. Got the fan shroud still to put on. And then the lovely task of putting the fenders and the body panels back on. We should have put the fenders, or at least welded in bolts for the fenders from behind when the tranny was out, but hindsight's 20/20. So we won't be doing that. So we'll try and fish them in there. The hydraulic cylinder works. It has a good amount of throw to it. Now we just got to figure out how we're going to tie everything in. I am not going to put down pressure on the 3-point, at least for the time being, just because, as John pointed out, not having the ability to float mechanically would mean that the implement would be subject to stress if I were to come across a rock or something like that. Whereas, you know, with a mechanical 3-point, the only down pressure you have is if you're leaning on it, and even then it'll still kick up if you hit something, and I don't want to fuck anything up, at least initially. And I figured, you know, Deere's none of, you know, nothing that had a factory hydraulic rear hitch had factory down pressure, so I can probably do without it. Got the fill pipe, not the drain pipe, the fill pipe in for the transmission, so that's good. Test fit the nut cover, and that fits. We just went out and got some P-clips for the hydraulic hoses here, so we're going to run them kind of like that, try and tie them up close to the center of the tractor. I am going to need to get a wheel spacer for it because the transmission or the axle is slightly offset to the left. So if memory serves, I think it's about a 3/4 of an inch wider here than it is there. So I'll just get a wheel spacer for that. This is how I'm probably going to wind out running the wheels in terms of offset. It is pretty wide, but fucking send it. So don't need to worry about that. I do need to get a new fuel cap at some point. This one's cracked and it leaks. All the gauges work. Right now the lights are not T-on power. We might change that just to make it impossible to leave the lights on. Hour meter works. It has a 1/10 of an hour of runtime on it, so that's good. Can start keeping track of that for maintenance purposes. That's really it. I've got to shorten the fuel line, as you can see it hanging down there. So a lot of progress in the last 3 days, that's for sure. Anyway, I might do a couple little things here, but I'm going to call it for the video. So at the very soonest until tomorrow. Thanks for everybody that's followed along this far. Thanks for all the suggestions in the comments. I do appreciate that because we've thought of a lot, but obviously we haven't thought of everything. So it's always good to get a little bit more feedback. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to have some more updates coming soon.